Hi Jack, this one is for you. I appreciate that you said you were going to bring the rolls to Aunt Claire's for Thanksgiving this year while we were away in Chicago. So I've got everything set up here to kind of walk you through that. I'm going to actually, unlike I would probably normally do, follow the recipe pretty closely for this America's Test Kitchen cookbook. It's on page 541. And so I thought you might need a little assistance in just like how to measure stuff, which equipment within our house do you want to use, and getting everything together. So the ingredients call for 1 1/4 cups warm milk. So we've got some milk here, 8 tablespoons of butter to start. That's 1 stick. We've got an envelope of yeast, and so you'll see they're like in packets of 3, but you'll just want to grab one of those. And we just have some regular table salt, and then of course some flour and sugar. And so let's get started. Okay, so even though the ingredient list starts out with the milk, that's fine, but just a little tip for you. If you get the measuring cup wet with the wet ingredients first, then your flour is going to stick and it'll be harder to measure. So we're going to start with the 4 cups of flour. I like to use this one because it dips into this canister nicely. So here's how you want to do it. Just kind of dip the whole thing in, kind of like tap it a little bit to make sure there's no air bubbles down in there, and then I just take a knife and level it off. So there we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. And so then we're going to go in with our salt. I like to just mix that in with the dry ingredients. And so the recipe here calls for 1 1/2 teaspoons, but my rule of thumb is this. If I'm using 2 cups of flour, I'm always going to use 1 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to deviate a little bit there. And I'm going to go with 1, 2 teaspoons, not tablespoons, of salt. And so we've got that. I'm also going to whisk that up a little bit here. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in the mixer here. You can see I've got the stand mixer. I'm going to use the bread hook for this application. So I'm just going to go ahead and get it poured in there. And okay, so this can be kind of like hard to get if you're not used to it. So I'm going to put this dough hook on, and then this bowl is on these little hooks, and you just really need to push it down with some force. So there we go. Okay, so I've got my 8 tablespoons or 1 stick of butter in here. And this is where I vary a little from just the order of the instructions on the recipe, because I want to get this butter melted. I mean, you can do it on the stove, but I'm just going to do it in the microwave. So first I'm going to melt the butter, then I'm going to add the milk. If you add the milk first, the butter won't necessarily melt all the way before the milk gets too hot. So I'm going to put this in the microwave. Please cover it, Jack. Otherwise you're going to have a splattery mess all over the microwave. And then I'll get back to you with the milk. Okay, so that took just a little bit under a minute, and now you can see it's nice and melty. I have the 1 1/4 cups milk here. So I always, rather than read it on this larger thing, it's hard to see those red lines, so I just do 1 cup and 1/4 cup. And the thing about these measurements too is it's pretty forgiving. So you want to start out with the correct measurements at first, but you're probably going to have to do some adjusting with some extra flour or some extra liquid at the end. And the big thing to remember is do not let the dough be too dry. It's better to have it a little bit wet, otherwise your rolls will be a little bit dry. All right, so I've got this milk and this butter in here. I also have my sugar that I'm going to put in here. So this calls for 2 tablespoons, but I'm actually going to do 3. 1, to this kind of roll. Grandma Daisy used to make it. It's a little bit on the sweet side, but for this kind of roll, sorry, I like that. And so I'm gonna mix that together. And then the other part of our liquid here is the egg, but I don't want it to hurt all. So I'm shooting for about, I just have this funky meat thermometer here. It'll take a second to come up to temp, but I just kind of stir it around. I don't know, I'm looking for about 90, 100 degrees. Yeah, we've only got like 80 right now, so we got a little ways to go. So I'm gonna put that in for probably 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna put my yeast in there. Okay, that was about 45 seconds, and yeah, it's nice. It's just like a nice warm bath, and so that's kind of what you want. This says 100 degrees, and so that's good. You don't want it too hot. If it's too hot, it will kill your yeast. I also put the sugar in there because yeast likes sugar. It helps it grow. Salt can be a retardant, but that's why I put it in here with the dry ingredients. And so I'm gonna put that in there. Sometimes I just mix it all up and then you can have the liquid a little bit hotter, but because I had this egg, I'm doing it that way because we don't want scrambled eggs in our bowl. So I'm just gonna whisk in this yeast, kind of dissolve it. All right, and now I'm gonna take this plastic cover I had, and we're just gonna give the yeast, I don't know, about 5 minutes, 7 minutes or so to bloom. You'll start to see some little bubbles form from the yeast. So we're just gonna give that a little rest. All right, this is starting to bubble up now. I'm gonna give it a few more minutes, but I forgot a tip for you. For a lot of baking recipes, it'll call for eggs at room temperature. So, or, you know, just like leave it out at room temperature for a while, but there's no need to do that. What you do is you get some hot tap water, take your egg, you just put it in there, and it'll come up to room temperature pretty darn quick, probably, you know, 5 minutes or less. So if you ever have a recipe and you don't want a warm egg like cakes, or in this case, I did this and then beat my egg a little bit because I didn't want it to cool down the dough temperature when I really need the yeast to be activated at the warmer temperature. Okay, well, this yeast is looking nice and bubbly and foamy now. So I'm just gonna go ahead and turn this mixer on low and just start putting this in slowly. And I'm gonna move this shot to the mixer so you can kind of see what I'm looking for as we go. Okay, so first I'm gonna lift the bowl up so we're ready to go. I've got my dough hook in here. It's gonna take a while for this to get started, but I'm just gonna start. This is gonna be loud, so I'm just gonna start on low and gradually put this in here. Speed 2. Spatula, I don't want to waste any. Okay. Now I'm just going to let this go for a little bit. It's going to gradually pick up the flour as it goes around, and then we'll tune back in a moment. So I'm going to be at the ready here with a little bit more milk because I find I almost always need more liquid. And the longer you mix it, you're going to see the flour a little bit more blended in. So I'm going to microwave this a little bit so it's about the same temperature as the other, and then it'll be ready. Okay, this is part 2, facing the mixer. As you can see, this is kind of a big old ball of dough, and right now this is way too dry. I can tell that already, and it's only been going for like a minute maybe, so I am going to add a little bit more of that milk, and I'll just keep this going and let you see it every now and then so you can get a feel for the texture that we're looking for. Okay, so I have an extra maybe 3/4 of cup milk here, and I just put some in. Go really slowly because otherwise it'll splatter you. So you can kind of see that there. It's just slowly mixing in. I'll pour a little bit more. just going to kind of slowly keep adding that. And we may need to add more flour eventually, but I'm more concerned with it having enough liquid. All right, now I'm adding in my egg. I forgot earlier. I should have done that, but now that's going in. No wonder it was looking a little dry. But that's okay. It's pretty forgiving. So we're just going to let that mix right in. We're getting closer. That's looking pretty nice. It's hard to get it focused in here. It's kind of you can still see some on the sides of the bowl, but it's starting to come together. Now the longer I mix it, the more that flour is going to absorb that liquid. So I'm going to let it go a little bit longer. Okay, so it's been going for probably 10 minutes, maybe not quite. I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking it needs a little bit more flour. So I'm just going to do like a little at a time here. This is just a little bit less than a 1/4 cup. And we're going to give it some time to let that mix in. Once again, start slowly or you'll have flour all over yourself. And we'll see where we land. Okay, this is looking pretty promising, but I just added that flour. So it's going to continue to absorb, but this is about what I want it to look like. I'm just going to give it a little bit more time to let all that flour absorb in and make sure we don't need any more. Okay, this is looking pretty good. You can see how it's sticking to the bottom a little bit, but most of it's not sticking to the sides. But a little bit of stick's good, otherwise it might be too dry. So we're going to turn that off. And here's your next tip that will come in very handy. So I have a little cup of water here, and I'm going to have my spatula. Now, if you're trying to get this loose from the bowl, don't use flour, use water. And even on your hands, if you use water instead of flour, your dough will not stick. See how that comes off of there pretty easily? So I'm going to put this down, and I'm just going to keep dipping my spatula in the water. Just kind of work it off of this dough hook and scrape down the sides here. And then what I'm going to use a little flour on the counter here, and not too much, and just kind of spread that out. And I'm going to dump this dough out onto here, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so got my dough here, my little thing of water, and I'm just going to work this out bit by bit so it comes out in a cohesive ball. There we go. All right, now I put that down on that little bit of flour that I made, and take my ring off, and I'm just going to kind of turn this out a little bit more flour. I'm not going to go crazy here, but what I want to do is shape it into a nice, ooh, that feels nice and elastic and smooth, and that's what you want. It's a little tacky, but it's not super sticky, and so that's a really good texture. It's a little bit stretchy, see? And so I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it in on itself and kind of create this ball here. Now you don't want too much flour at this point, because when you start trying to form your ball by turning it around on the counter, the flour, you want a little stick to the counter so it'll actually form that ball. Okay, I think that's pretty good. The bowl I had the flour in earlier, I put some oil in here with a paper towel. And so got that. I'm gonna make sure it gets kind of oiled on all sides. I'm gonna cover this up. I'm going to use a towel. Sometimes I use plastic wrap. Today I'm just going to use a towel. I'm going to get it slightly damp. And put that over here. And we're going to let it sit here for about an hour. And it's going to double in size. And I'll show you what that means when we get there. Now I set it back by the stove because I have a pot roast in the oven. So you want kind of a warm place for it without a draft. I mean, it doesn't have to be hot, but you don't want to put it somewhere cool. It'll just take longer for it to rise. If you're doing it kind of ahead of time, sure, put it in a cooler spot if you're going to have to leave it for, 2 hours or something like that. So we're just going to let it do its thing. All right, Jack. He's right here, but he's not going to want to be on camera. So this has been, it took longer than I thought it would this time. Usually, sometimes it can be like 45 minutes or so. This one was a good, I don't know, probably an hour, 20 minutes, something like that. So now we're just gonna kind of, look at there. Ooh, it feels nice and toasty. Feels good though, nice and elastic. See, that's the texture that you want. It's kind of stretchy, a little tacky, it's not sticky. And so we want about 24 rolls out of this. So we're gonna do that. I've got over here, this is my favorite, as beat up as it is, roll pan. I think it's the easiest one to use. I've already put some butter in there, but I'm also going to line it with this parchment paper to fit in the bottom. Parchment paper, no matter what you're baking, it's always a good guarantee that something will not stick. So anyway, I'm gonna roll this out a little bit, not roll it, but just kind of press it so that we can get it to a point where we're making about 24 equal sections. Like I said, if my kitchen scale was working, I would just put this whole thing on the scale, divide it by 24, and then it'd probably be about 2.3 ounces or so. And that's what I would do. So we're gonna do this the easy way. We're gonna divide it in as equal pieces as we can. We're gonna make nice little tight balls, and then we're gonna put them in the pan and let it rise again. Oh, I just think the other thing to note here is there was an ever so light dusting of flour, but not much at all, because really you kind of want a little bit of counter stick here. Otherwise it'll kind of snap back on you, and we don't want that. So right now I'm just trying to get this into as evenly, thickness as we can. And so I'll just continue on that, and then we're just gonna do cut it in, sections until we reach 24 rolls. Okay, so I've got 8, I don't know, reasonably even, so I could tell that one's heavier. Okay, more on that one. And I don't know, we might not get 24 out of this, but I think from this point, I think we'll get like 16-ish. Because I think if I cut these in half, that's about what we're gonna want. Yeah, so I'm gonna say we'll get about 16. So what we're gonna do, kind of take that piece, and like we did the larger dough ball earlier, we're gonna kind of fold it in on itself until we have kind of this nice smooth top. Put it on the counter, kind of roll it up a little bit. Once again, you want that stick on the counter, not a lot of flour. Alrighty, and we're gonna just continue to roll those up until we have some equal sized balls, and then we'll put them in the pan. Okay, we have 17 rolls. We'll see if they'll fit here. And I'm just gonna kind of stack them 4 across. And keep going down. You kind of want them to be touching a little bit. They don't have to, but it kind of makes that nice like fluffy on the side, and then the little dome top when you do it this way. It helps them like rise up a little and then fluff out. Grandma Daisy used to do it where she would roll it out flat, take a glass, and I've done this too, put a pat of butter in the middle and fold it over, which is good, but it's hard to get them even. Let's see, we got quite a bit of space in here. See, normally I make like a triple batch, so I honestly wasn't quite sure how this pan would fill up given my new amount here. Well, we'll see how that works. I am gonna even though there's more space over here, I am going to kind of have them like touching a little bit. And you want it to be kind of, I think it was kind of cooler in here earlier than it should be. I had the door open because it was a nice day. So I've got that roast in the oven here. So I'm just gonna, you don't want it like, if you have the oven on, like here, that vent is and it comes out really hot. You don't want to have it like a real hot spot because it'll kind of crust out the edges. But I have this slightly damp towel. And I'm just gonna put it back over there. I'm gonna check these after 45 minutes and then they should be ready to bake. All right, Jack, it's been about an hour, and so those have doubled in size. I'm going to put them in the oven for 375, about 20 minutes total probably, but I'm going to check them at about 15 minutes and we'll see where we are. All right, these just came out of the oven. It took about 20 minutes. Now I've got a little bit of melted butter. I'm going to brush it across the top, and then we should be good to go. All right, so it's taste test time, and of course we have a big lump of butter on here, and let's give it a try. Pull it apart nicely. Has a nice fluffy interior, a nice crispy top. Very good. Yeah, you make these, you're going to be the hero of Thanksgiving. Good luck, Jack.